Between the skeletal remains of guard towers and collapsed barracks, a small figure pressed against the cold wall of what had once been the communications bunker. Lily Chen, barely 10 years old, pulled her oversized military surplus jacket tighter against the October chill. The old Fort Morrison had been abandoned after budget cuts closed the base 5 years ago, its once proud structures now home only to scavengers and those society had forgotten. Lily was among the forgotten, a runaway from an overcrowded group. Home, where her quiet nature and language barriers had made her an easy target for bullies. Heavy boots echoed across the cracked asphalt, their rhythm measured and professional. Lily's heart pounded as she recognized the distinctive sound of combat boots on concrete. Through a gap in the chain-link fence, she glimpsed a tall figure moving through the ruins with calculated precision. Captain Jake Hawk Morrison, 38, and battle-hardened from 3 tours overseas, was methodically searching the abandoned base that bore his family name. The former Army Ranger turned private security consultant had returned following intelligence reports of weapons smuggling operations using the old facility as a staging ground. His weathered face carried the weight of command decisions and losses that had shaped him into a man who trusted action over words. He'd expected to find evidence of criminal activity, not a terrified child living in the ruins of his grandfather's old command post. "Come out slowly," Jake called, his voice carrying authority tempered by years of dealing with civilians in crisis zones. "I'm not here to hurt you." His rifle remained pointed downward, a deliberate signal of non-aggression that his training had taught him to use with non-combatants. Lily remained frozen behind a stack of abandoned ammunition crates, her dark eyes tracking his movements. She'd learned that adults who made promises often had hidden agendas, but something in this man's posture, the way he kept his weapon lowered and his hands visible, suggested he might be different. Jake crouched down, making himself appear less threatening. "My name's Jake. I used to come here when I was about your age. My grandfather was the base commander." When silence stretched between them, he noticed the small collection of canned goods and the makeshift shelter she'd constructed from salvaged materials. A distant rumble shattered the morning quiet. Through the maze of abandoned buildings came the growl of multiple engines, AVs moving fast and with obvious hostile intent. The Red Serpents, a militia group that had claimed this territory for their illegal arms dealing operation, were conducting their weekly sweep for intruders. Their leader, Viktor Reaper Kozlov, was a former military contractor with a reputation for eliminating anyone who witnessed their operations. His group had been using the old base's underground bunkers to store weapons before moving them to various criminal organizations across 3 states. "They'll be here in 90 seconds, Jake said, his tactical assessment automatic. "Those aren't soldiers, they're killers who don't take prisoners." He extended his hand toward Lily. "I can get you out of here, but you have to trust me right now." The engine noise grew louder, accompanied by harsh voices speaking in what sounded like multiple languages and the metallic sound of weapons being readied. Lily saw something in Jake's eyes that made her breath catch, not the cold calculation she'd seen in other authority figures, but genuine protective determination. As the first ATV rounded the corner of a collapsed maintenance shed, she made her choice. Small fingers grasped Jake's outstretched hand just as the first militiaman spotted them through the fence. "Go, go, go." Jake pulled Lily close, his body instinctively shielding her as they sprinted toward his concealed tactical vehicle. Automatic weapons fire erupted behind them, bullets sparking off concrete and metal in the military graveyard that had nearly become their tomb. The armored Humvee's engine roared to life as Jake gunned it through the main gate, crashing through the rusted barrier. In the passenger seat, Lily clutched a small stuffed elephant, the only possession she'd managed to grab during their desperate escape. Behind them, the Red Serpents ATVs poured through the breach in hot pursuit, their riders firing wild bursts that shattered windows and punctured metal. "Hold on tight." Jake yanked the steering wheel hard right, sending the Humvee careening down a hidden access road that led to the base's underground tunnel system. The old Cold War-era bunker complex and storage tunnels created a hidden network beneath the installation passages known only to former personnel and those who'd spent years exploring the abandoned facility. The tunnel entrance was barely wide enough for the vehicle, concrete walls scraping against armored sides as they plunged into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered to life, activated by motion sensors that still functioned after years of abandonment. The underground passage opened into a vast chamber where Jake's contact waited in the shadows. Dr. Maria Vasquez, a battlefield. Medic turned underground medical coordinator, had established a hidden clinic in the old base hospital's basement levels. Her facility served military veterans, undocumented immigrants, and anyone else who couldn't access traditional healthcare systems. At 42, she'd traded military commendations for the freedom to heal without bureaucratic interference. Jake, what kind of trouble have you brought me this time? Dr. Vasquez emerged from behind medical equipment she'd salvaged and repurposed, her compact frame radiating the competence that had kept her alive during deployments in hostile territories. This is Lily, Jake said, gently guiding the girl forward while keeping one protective hand on her shoulder. She needs medical attention and somewhere safe to stay. His voice carried an edge of desperation that surprised even him. When had this child's welfare become so important to his mission? Everything. By the looks of it, Dr. Vasquez finished, her trained eye immediately noting signs of malnutrition and stress-related exhaustion. Sweetheart, when did you last have a real meal? Lily held up for fingers, then pointed to her stomach. 4 days? Dios mo. The sound of 8 TV engines echoed through the tunnel system. The red serpents had found the entrance. Jake checked his rifle, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. Kozlov won't give up easily. Too much at stake with their operation here. Then we go deeper, said a gruff voice from a side passage. Samuel Prophet Washington emerged from the shadows, his knowledge of the base's underground systems legendary among the area's veteran community. Once the facility's senior maintenance chief, he'd stayed behind when the base closed, becoming the unofficial guardian of its history and secrets. At T-68, Prophet was thin but weary, his dark skin weathered by decades of military service and his white beard earning him his nickname among those who sought his guidance. There's an old munitions transport system that connects to the river facility. Rails are still good, and there's a handcar in Storage Bay 7. I'm not leaving her behind, Jake said immediately, surprising himself with the vehemence of his response. The protective instinct he felt toward Lily went beyond professional duty. It was becoming personal in ways that his training had never prepared him for. Dr. Vasquez began packing medical supplies and emergency rations into tactical backpacks. The old command bunker connects to the civilian access tunnels. If we can reach the river facility, there's a way out through the spillway system. 8 TV engines grew louder, accompanied by shouts in multiple languages and the harsh beams of tactical flashlights. The red serpents were closing in systematically, their leader Viktor Kozlov's voice echoing through the tunnels in accented English. Find them. No witnesses to our operation. Jake made a decision that went against every tactical principle he'd learned in Ranger training. Instead of calculating odds and developing fallback positions, he looked at Lily's frightened face and felt something fundamental shift inside him. This wasn't about gathering intelligence anymore. It was about protecting someone who had no one else. Prophet. How long to reach the river facility? He asked while checking his ammunition and scanning the tunnel entrances for defensive positions. 20 minutes through the munitions tunnels, but will be exposed during the rail crossing, Prophet replied, his weathered hands already reaching for the heavy lever that would activate the old transport system. And Jake, if they catch us down there with the girl, they'll assume we know about their operation. Kozlov doesn't leave loose ends. Jake's jaw tightened as he processed the implications. 3 days ago, his biggest concern had been completing a routine security assessment. Now, looking at this abandoned child who'd already been failed by every system meant to protect her, he realized that some things mattered more than personal safety. The first red serpent rounded the tunnel corner just as they slipped through the heavy steel door leading to the munitions transport system. Behind them, icy water dripped from ceiling pipes like liquid time, carrying them toward an uncertain refuge in the facility's forgotten depths. The handcar's wheels screeched against rusted rails as Prophet pumped the manual lever, propelling them deeper into the base's forgotten transport system. Jake crouched protectively over Lily, his rifle ready while emergency lighting cast moving shadows on tunnel walls that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. These rails were built to move ordnance from the storage bunkers to the river loading dock, Prophet explained between rhythmic pumps of the lever mechanism. Designed to be invisible from aerial surveillance, which means Kozlov's people might not know they exist. The tunnel system curved and branched like underground arteries, connecting various sections of the sprawling military complex. Water dripped constantly from overhead pipes, creating an echoing percussion that masked the sound of their passage but also made it difficult to hear potential pursuit. Lily pressed close to Jake's side, her small hand gripping his tactical vest. Despite the danger, she seemed calmer now, as if his presence had given her something she'd been missing for too long. The trust she was placing in him felt both precious and terrifying. There, Dr. Vasquez pointed ahead where the tunnel opened into a wider chamber. The old ammunition storage facility. We can rest here and check our route to the river dock. The storage chamber was vast, lined with empty weapon racks and ammunition lockers that had once held enough firepower to defend against Cold War threats. Now it served as a way station in their underground exodus, offering multiple exit routes and defensive positions if they were discovered. Jake helped Lily down from the handcar, noting how she immediately moved to stay within arm's reach of him. Her instinctive trust was changing something inside him, awakening protective feelings he'd thought his military experience had burned out of him. Jake, Dr. Vasquez said quietly, pulling him aside while Prophet examined tunnel maps mounted on the chamber walls. That girl has been through serious trauma. The way she watches exits, how she startles at sudden sounds. She's been living in survival mode for months, maybe longer. What does she need? Jake asked, his voice rougher than intended. The question surprised him with its intensity. When had Lily's welfare become his primary mission objective? Safety, stability, and someone who won't abandon her, Dr. Vasquez replied. But Jake, taking responsibility for her means changing everything about your life. Are you prepared for that? Before Jake could answer, Prophet's voice cut through their conversation. We've got company coming through the main tunnel. Multiple contacts, moving fast and coordinated. The distant sound of boots on rails confirmed Prophet's assessment. The Red Serpents had found the transport system and were closing in with military precision. Jake checked his rifle while scanning the chamber for defensive advantages. The river dock is still 10 minutes away, Prophet reported, studying his tunnel maps. But there's another option. The old emergency exit system leads directly to the surface near the civilian access road. How exposed? Jake asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. Completely open ground for 200 meters before reaching tree cover. Prophet folded the map, his expression grim. They'll see us coming, but it's our only chance to avoid a firefight down here. Jake looked at Lily, who was watching their conversation with the intense focus of someone who'd learned that adult decisions directly affected her survival. The choice was between a tactical retreat through dangerous terrain or a potential underground battle with an innocent child caught in the crossfire. We take the surface route, Jake decided. Better to risk exposure than guarantee a firefight. He knelt beside Lily, meeting her eyes with the same seriousness he'd once reserved for briefing fellow soldiers. We're going to go up to ground level and run for the trees. I need you to stay right beside me and do exactly what I say. Can you do that? Lily nodded solemnly, her small hand finding his larger one. In that moment, Jake realized that his priorities had fundamentally shifted. Success was no longer measured by mission completion, but by keeping this child safe. The emergency exit ladder stretched upward into darkness, each rung carrying them closer to daylight and uncertainty. Behind them in the tunnels, the Red Serpents' voices grew louder as they methodically searched the underground maze. Dr. Vasquez climbed ahead, her medical training making her the logical choice to check surface conditions. Prophet brought up the rear, his intimate knowledge of the facility's systems making him invaluable for covering their retreat. As they climbed toward the surface access hatch, Jake kept one hand on Lily's back, ready to shield her from whatever waited above. The sound of boots on rails below reminded him that their window for escape was rapidly closing. The surface hatch opened onto a maintenance area surrounded by overgrown vegetation, nature reclaiming what the military had abandoned. 200 meters of open ground stretched between them and the safety of the tree line, with no cover except scattered concrete barriers and rusted equipment. On my signal, Jake whispered, scanning the perimeter for signs of Red Serpent scouts. Stay low, stay together, and don't look back. Sunlight hit them like a physical blow after hours in the underground darkness. Jake's eyes watered as he scanned the terrain between their position and the tree line, cataloging every piece of cover and potential ambush point with ranger-trained precision. The abandoned base stretched around them like a concrete graveyard, its empty buildings casting long shadows across cracked pavement. The civilian access road lay beyond a strip of forest that had grown wild in the years since military maintenance ended. Now, Jake whispered, and they broke from the maintenance shed in a coordinated rush toward the distant trees. Lily stayed glued to Jake's side, her small legs working to match his longer stride as they sprinted across the open ground. Dr. Vasquez moved with surprising speed for someone carrying a full medical pack, while Prophet's knowledge of the terrain guided them around the most dangerous exposure points. They'd covered half the distance when the first shout echoed from behind them. Red Serpent scouts had reached the surface and spotted their escape attempt. Within seconds, the crack of rifle fire split the morning air, bullets kicking up concrete dust around their feet, zigzag pattern. Jake shouted, pulling Lily close as they weaved between abandoned equipment. His body instinctively shielded her from the incoming fire while his mind calculated angles and distances with combat-honed precision. A concrete barrier provided momentary cover, allowing them to catch their breath while automatic weapons fire sparked off its edges. Jake checked his ammunition enough for a fighting retreat, but not enough for a prolonged engagement against superior numbers. The tree line is 50 meters, Dr. Vasquez reported, pressing herself against the barrier while checking her medical supplies for damage. But they're setting up crossfire positions to cut off our approach. Prophet pointed toward a drainage ditch that ran parallel to their intended route. Storm drain leads right to the forest edge. Built it myself 20 years ago, should still be clear. The ditch was narrow and partially filled with stagnant water, but it offered concealment from the Red Serpent's increasingly accurate fire. Jake went first, testing the footing while keeping his rifle ready. Lily followed without hesitation, her trust in him absolute despite the chaos surrounding them. Water soaked through their clothes as they low-crawled through the drainage system, the concrete channel barely wide enough for adults but perfectly sized for a child who'd learned to hide in small spaces. The sound of gunfire grew more distant as they put obstacles between themselves and their pursuers. Contact front. Prophet's warning came just as armed figures appeared at the forest edge, Red Serpents moving to cut off their escape route. The militia group had anticipated their destination and positioned troops accordingly. Jake's ranger training took over. Dr. Vasquez, take Lily and continue through the drain to the road. Prophet and I will create a distraction. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to making life or death decisions under pressure. I'm not leaving you, Lily said quietly, her small hand gripping his tactical vest. The fierce determination in her young voice reminded Jake that this child had already survived abandonment by every adult who should have protected her. You're not, Jake assured her, his tone gentler despite the tactical situation. We're all going together, but I need you to trust Dr. Vasquez for a few minutes while Prophet and I handle the bad guys. The exchange of gunfire intensified as the Red Serpents closed in from multiple directions. Jake could hear Viktor Kozlov's voice directing his troops with professional efficiency. This wasn't a gang of thugs, but a coordinated military unit with superior numbers and positioning. Smoke grenades, Prophet suggested, pulling 2 canisters from his pack. Create confusion and cover our movement to the road. Jake nodded, checking his remaining ammunition while studying the terrain between their position and freedom. The civilian access road was less than 100 meters away, but it might as well have been miles with trained killers controlling the high ground. On 3, Jake counted down, finger on the smoke grenade pin. Prophet takes point. Dr. Vasquez protects Lily. I'll cover our 6. The tactical brevity felt natural, but the protective instinct driving his decisions was something entirely new. The smoke billowed across their position as they emerged from the drainage ditch in a coordinated rush. Gray clouds provided concealment while Jake laid down covering fire, his rifle cracking rhythmically as he targeted muzzle flashes in the tree line. They reached the civilian access road just as vehicles approached from both directions, but instead of Red Serpent reinforcements, Jake recognized the distinctive outline of police patrol cars responding to reports of gunfire near the abandoned base. Federal agent, Jake shouted, producing credentials from his tactical vest as law enforcement officers took positions behind their vehicles. We have civilians in need of protection. The arrival of legitimate authorities shifted the tactical balance decisively. The Red Serpents melted back into the forest rather than risk confrontation with police forces, their weapons smuggling operation suddenly exposed to official scrutiny. As paramedics checked Lily for injuries and federal agents secured the scene. Jake realized that their desperate escape had accomplished more than just survival. It had brought Kozlov's criminal enterprise to the attention of authorities who could shut it down permanently. 6 weeks later, the abandoned military base buzzed with federal activity as FBI teams methodically dismantled the Red Serpent's weapons smuggling operation. Jake stood at the entrance to the old communications bunker where he'd first found Lily, watching agents catalog evidence while construction crews prepared to demolish the structures that had harbored criminal activity. Behind him, Lily sat at a folding table, carefully working on homework assignments while keeping one eye on Jake's location. Her transformation had been remarkable. Regular meals and peaceful sleep had restored color to her cheeks, while consistent safety had allowed her natural intelligence to flourish. The adjustment hadn't been easy. Jake's security consulting business required restructuring to accommodate his new responsibilities, while Lily struggled with trusting that this stability wouldn't disappear like everything else in her life. But slowly, carefully, they'd built something that felt like family. Dr. Vasquez had become a regular presence, officially monitoring Lily's medical recovery, while unofficially serving as Jake's guide to child psychology. Her medical bag now contained educational supplies alongside medications, and she'd connected them with Sarah Mitchell, a social worker who specialized in helping military families navigate adoption procedures. Sarah, a former military spouse whose husband had died in combat, understood the unique challenges facing veterans who suddenly found themselves responsible for traumatized children. At 36, she'd spent her career building bridges between military culture and civilian family services. Lily's making incredible progress, Sarah reported during her weekly visit, watching the girl arrange colored pencils with military precision. But the legal situation remains complicated without documentation of her original placement. I don't care about the paperwork, Jake interrupted, his voice carrying the same protective edge that had emerged during their escape from the base. What does she need to be safe and legal? Stability, routine, and eventually she'll need proper documentation for school enrollment and medical records, Sarah explained. Right now she exists in legal limbo, which isn't sustainable long-term. The conversation was interrupted by Prophet's arrival, his security clearance allowing him access to the active federal site. He carried official-looking documents and wore the satisfied expression of someone who'd solved a complex problem. Good news and complicated news, Prophet announced, setting down a folder of paperwork. The good news is that Lily's fingerprints don't match any missing children reports in the national database. She's been completely invisible to official systems. That's good news? Jake asked, though he was beginning to understand the implications. It means we can create her legal identity from scratch, Prophet explained. No conflicting records. No previous placements to unravel. As far as the official world is concerned, she never existed until now. Sarah frowned at the legal implications. And the complicated news is that to make it legitimate, Jake needs to formally adopt her. That means background investigations, home studies, court proceedings, the complete process. Jake felt his chest tighten. The thought of government officials examining his military record, his fitness as a parent, his ability to provide stable civilian life was terrifying in ways that combat had never been. But as he watched Lily carefully coloring inside the lines of a drawing, he realized the fear wasn't about his own exposure, it was about failing her. How long does adoption take? He asked, his voice rougher than intended. With proper documentation and federal connections, 6 months minimum, Sarah replied. But Jake, your background will be scrutinized intensively. Every deployment, every classified operation, every decision you made in military service will be examined. Are you prepared for that level of investigation? Before Jake could answer, Lily looked up from her drawing. She'd been listening, understanding more than any of them had realized. In her careful, deliberate handwriting, she'd written to words. At the bottom of her picture, my hero. The silence stretched as 3 adults processed the magnitude of those simple words. Jake knelt beside Lily's chair, his voice rough with emotions he hadn't expected to feel. Is that what you want, kiddo? For me to be your dad for real? Lily nodded solemnly, then reached into her backpack and pulled out the stuffed elephant she'd carried from their first desperate escape. She placed it carefully on the table next to her drawing and offering, a symbol of trust, a bridge between the abandoned child she'd been and the daughter she wanted to become. Then that's what we'll do, Jake said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we'll make it official. Outside the windows, federal agents continued dismantling the criminal operation that had brought them together, while construction crews prepared to transform the abandoned base into something new and productive. Like the unlikely family taking shape around a folding table, the old military installation was being rebuilt from its foundation into something better than what had come before. The adoption proceedings would take months, involving investigations and interviews that would test Jake's resolve and Lily's trust. But as they worked together on homework assignments while federal agents secured the perimeter, both understood that the real family bond had been forged weeks earlier in underground tunnels and open ground, when a soldier chose compassion over protocol, and a scared child chose trust over survival instinct. The abandoned military base that had harbored criminals was being transformed into a federal training facility, while the man and child who'd brought its secrets to light were building their own transformation from strangers thrown together by circumstance into a family united by choice.